What's going on, guys? Welcome to Real Outdoors with yours truly, AJ Villarreal. Take a look outside. Spring is in the air. It is April 4th to be exact. I know this is a few days late, but better late than never, I always say. So I'm going to go ahead and go through my top 5 baits for the month of April for you. Going to be some repeats from March. But I'm going to have some new ones in here that definitely can be a game changer going into the month of April, especially later on as April kind of gets going. With that first bait, it's something that was in March. I was out today, caught 6 of them, all on the OG Rocco. So that's just a square bill. The OG Rocco by Rapala is a great bait. I'm going to use this crawfish color on more rocky lakes like Priest, which I fished today, and this shad color on more of just, clear, some of those more natural grassier lakes. Like Center Hill, for example, I'd be throwing this color as opposed to this color. Making sure I'm hitting the bottom with it, want it deflecting off rock, deflecting off trees, any type of cover, ripping it through grass. I want it to be an erratic action. The reason I really do like the OG Rocco by Rapala is it's a balsa wood bait, it's silent, has enough weight to it, I can get a good cast on it. Overall, just a really versatile bait. I can cover a lot of ground, I can fish slow. Really just like using this bait, and I always have one tied on. I throw it on a 7.2 medium heavy moderate fast action rod, or the St. Croix Victory cranking rod. The reel I use is a Shimano SLX DC 6.4 to 1 gear ratio. I throw that on 12-pound fluorocarbon. My next bait, it's kind of a 2-for-1, right? I think it's really popular this time of year, and that is just going to be a worm. So whether it's your Senko or it's your trick worm, that is going to be probably my #1 searching bait for spawning fish. So I stroll into a pocket, I'm going to go ahead and bomb this thing out there, just let it sit, not really touch anything, maybe scope around, see what I find in my electronics. Then I'll go back and pick my bait up and see if anything has it, and if so, usually it might be a cruising bass, might have dropped it on a bed. It's a great way to kind of scan for those bass before you stroll up on them and kind of spook them off. So I found that to be a really useful tactic when I'm spawn fishing or when I'm bed fishing. This first worm, it's a special trick worm. I'm not going to really give this one away. It is a worm I kind of found randomly at a bait shop, and it's just a little bit thicker than most. It stays up there longer, has a bigger body, so I really like it. I throw it on a 4/0 spear point worm hook. The thing is awesome. I don't miss any fish with this. My hookup ratio is phenomenal. Can't recommend them enough, and it is truly a great hook. They make more than just worm hooks. They make flipping hooks. They make trailer hooks. Actually, for my Senko, and I don't have it out with me right now, but I use a spear point wacky hook when I throw my wacky rig. Same thing. I'm going to do the same thing with my trick worm. I'm going to pitch it out there. I'm going to skip it under dock, skip it into cover. It's going to be a great way to catch them in April. Now for something new, or something in addition for the month of April, and that is going to be a buzzbait. So I love starting out my mornings throwing a buzzbait. So as that sun's rising, you see fish surfacing every now and then. Even the fish that are on beds, if you run this buzzbait over the top of them, it's going to kind of irritate them and lead to a strike, or potentially lead to a strike. For my buzzbait, I throw this same thing I do with my spinner bait. It's going to be on a 7.2 to 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod with a 7 point whatever to 1 gear ratio reel with 12-pound fluorocarbon test. One thing I do to my buzzbait, which I also do to my spinner baits, is I add a trailer. And this is just a biffle bug. I just try and make it match the skirt. The reason I do that is I personally believe that it gives the fish a bigger target to aim for when they're going to hit this top water. I can't tell you how many times I've been fishing the top water, fish misses the bite or misses the bait, and I just don't get anything. I set the hook on nothing and the fish just completely whiffs and my bait continues to come back to me. I think by adding this trailer, it has more of a body, it can see it, it can target it, it goes in, and I just get more strikes and I get a better hookup ratio when I do have this trailer attached. So I think that goes a long way. Another thing for your buzzbait. So this is a Booyah buzzbait. As you can see, it has that little metal piece that also hangs down. So as the blade comes through, it clanks it. If yours does not have that, make sure you bend the wire on your buzzbait so the blade is just barely nicking the wire. You want it to make that extra clicking sound. Think about when your square bill deflects off a rock, it makes a sound. You want to have that same constant sound. It's going to irritate those fish, aggravate them, makes them more aware that a bait's there, and they're going to go after it and feed. So I just think those are two things I add to my buzzbait that definitely put it above the rest of my top waters this time of year. My next bait is going to be a good old swim jig. I love throwing a swim jig, especially as I'm pulling into pockets. I'm going to cast this thing along. I generally like to fish this in more timber and more grass. Even though I know a spinnerbait and a chatterbait does really well, I want something that gives out a little bit less vibration and is more of just, that bait, that minnow gliding through the water. The fish sees it, reacts, and that's going to really trigger that strike. So I really do like a swim jig for this time of year. I still throw my spinnerbait, I still will throw my chatterbait, but I will pick up a swim jig before I pick up one of those. I just think I can do a little bit more with it. I could really skip it in. I can really fish it in some heavy cover and not worry so much about getting hung up. And it really does well for me on the back end. I'm going to throw my swim jig on a 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod with 14-pound fluorocarbon. If I need to get it deeper, I'm going to put it on 12-pound fluorocarbon, and then that gear ratio is going to be a 7-to-1 gear ratio. I don't need to burn it back, but I do want to be able to pick up line. I want it to be a moving bait, so I don't want it too slow. I feel like that 7-to-1 gear ratio is right in the middle and ends up doing really well for me, especially with getting strikes and getting a good hook set. And then last but not least, probably my favorite bait to fish, especially going to college up in Wisconsin, fishing the Mississippi, up in La Crosse a bunch, is a frog. I love a frog bite. I think you got kind of two different types of frogs. So the frog I'm most used to throwing is more of a walking frog. So one like this, I'll walk it back and forth. Sometimes I'll just straight retrieve it until I get to a patch or an opening in the cover, and then I'll twitch it and make it go side to side. But now that I live down in Tennessee, what I'm more likely using, or what I've been using more often, is more of a popping frog. So I'm going to throw this into cover the same way. I'm going to pop it back to me. I'm going to throw it in the back of coves, back of pockets, anywhere there might even be a spawning bass. If I pop this over a bed, this is going to irritate that bass. It's going to piss him off. It's really going to generate more strikes for me. Now my frog, I want to be sure that you guys are definitely throwing this on the right setup. I think I'm not going to say this is the most important setup to get right, but you're going to miss a lot of fish frog fishing. So having the perfect setup goes a long way. I throw it on anything from a 7.3 to 7.6, heavy action rod, fast action, 8-to-1 gear ratio, on 65-pound braid, and straight braid. The reason you want to have that heavy action rod is if you're fishing in lily pads, heavy grass, you need to be able to set that hook and get it out. Well, you also need to have strong enough line that's going to be able to get it out for you with little to no give. So that's where that 8-to-1 gear ratio and that line really comes in, as well as having that heavy action rod, because I need to be able to pick up that line quickly. Now, another thing when I am frog fishing, so I think we're all probably guilty of this, where we have our frog, the second we see a splash, we set the hook, and boom, nothing on it, right? So something I have learned over trial and error is after I see that splash, I just count to 1, 2 in my head, then give them a hook set, right? So I want them to get it almost 9 times out of 10 when they come up and they get that bait, they're not coming with you. They're coming and they're gonna turn back. And when they do that, long as you count to 2 and let them get back underwater and then you set the hook, that's gonna dig both those hooks in way deeper. You're gonna have a way better hookup ratio. You're gonna land a lot more fish, and it's gonna go a long way. Additionally, one thing I do to my frogs as well is I'm going to trim the tails or the legs of my frog. The length I always like is I flip it upside down, and I want it to just barely go past the nose of the frog or the lip of the frog. So I want those legs to be about the same length. The other thing I'm going to do for my frog, and I haven't done it to this one yet, is see those hooks right? See if you can see it there. See those hooks, how they're pointed in? So what I like to do is I'll actually take pliers and I'll widen the hooks out a little bit. Now it's gonna be less weedless, which is fine, because that's why I have the 65-pound braid. I'm gonna be able to rip it through it. I'm not too worried about it, because even though I'm gonna get more weeds, you know what else I'm gonna get more of? Fish. I'd rather get a few more weeds on my line to put an extra 2 fish in the boat than vice versa. So those are my top 5 baits for the month of April. Can't wait to see you next time.